Start recording. No lag. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, this is Last Lecture Productions. How Zack solved FF7. Check him out. He's real good. He's real good. I recommend him. I haven't seen this video yet. Let's watch.
97 localization of FF.
Wait. Okay.
The original 1997 localization of FF7 includes a lot of weird lines.
Yes.
Some of them have funny grammatical mistakes, while others are totally inscrutable.
This guy R6
The
is
vast
iconic.
majority of the time, these gaffes are the result of the game's rushed and under-resourced English translation.
Hold on.
The
I should
original
probably read a couple of these,
1997
right?
localization of FF7 includes a lot of weird lines.
So,
Some of them have funny
this
grammatical
guy-
mistakes,
this guy
while
R6,
others
That's iconic.
are totally inscrutable.
We were in Soldier and childhood friends before that. You were such a playboy. Yeah. Yeah, see that was a mistranslation because him and Johnny actually weren't friends, and I'm pretty sure Johnny wasn't in Soldier. And I don't think Cloud was a playboy either. I think all of that is incorrect, but
The vast majority of the time,
I remember Eris a lot. No, not that.
these gaffes are the result of the
You
game's
haven't
rushed
remembered.
and
You haven't
under-resourced
forgotten.
English
That's
translation.
not it.
And so you might be tempted to conclude the same about some of Barrett's dialogue in Medial, where he suddenly starts using the phrase Sephiroth's shadow. The first time he does so is outside of the clinic, after the party leaves Tifa to be alone with Cloud. There, Barrett wonders
What's
if he
up,
truly
dude?
even wants Cloud to recover from his coma. After all, it was Cloud who helped Sephiroth summon the meteor. Does he have anything to contribute to the future, or is he nothing more than Sephiroth's shadow? A few minutes later, Barrett utters these words again when he's back inside the clinic talking to Tifa. Before departing, he asks his teammate an uncomfortable question. Is the man in the wheelchair really the friend she grew up with, or is there some truth to all that Sephiroth's shadow stuff? Attentive players will no doubt be wondering what Barrett is on about. Where did this whole Sephiroth shadow thing come from?
Barrett just
As
decided
it turns
to get
out, this isn't a
philosophical.
mistranslation. The phrase is just as out of place in the Japanese script.
Oh no.
And that's because in the final version of FF7, the concept of Cloud being Sephiroth's shadow no longer exists.
Oh.
It's a remnant from an earlier version of the scenario that was scrapped during development.
Whoa, cut content.
We can get a good look at how it would have worked in Studio Bentstuff's 2005 Ultimania Omega. This 600-page tome includes a section called the Early Material File, a collection of episodes and ideas that went either unused or unacknowledged in the game's final release.
Dude, like, cut content back in this era of video games was like such a it was like you were whenever you would find out about it, it was like you were looking into an alternate reality, you know? Like, oh, I'm not supposed to see this type deal, you know what I mean? Like Final Fantasy VII's demo disc had debug mode on it, I think. It's been a long time, but like it had like a lot of stuff.
It's here that we find a radically different version of the Northern Crater scene right before the end of Disc 1. The event takes place in an area ringed by 500 people.
How can someone write 600 pages about one game? Because it's one of the greatest games of all time. I can write 600 pages just about Yuffie, and she's one character.
Pieces of man-sized materia. This map would later become the crystalline enclosure at the end of the Whirlwind Maze. As in the final version of the game, Sephiroth is suspended inside a giant crystal, but unlike there, his nude form here more closely resembles that of a woman, perhaps Genova.
Huh?
Instead of Hojo, who isn't present for the scene, Sephiroth's ambitions with the black materia are explained through Tifa, Vincent, Red 13, and Rufus. It's revealed that Sephiroth is
Yuffie
planning to
Google
cause a
Doc.
big bang by crashing a meteor into the planet. Doing so, as revealed in other scrapped material, will cause a new universe to form, over which Sephiroth will presumably be master. Sephiroth's tool of
Xerox?
choice for acquiring the black materia is, as usual, Cloud. However, the mechanics behind how this works are different from what we're familiar with. Rufus explains that when Sephiroth fell into the Mount Ebal Mako reactor and died, his overwhelming desire to keep living spawned a shadow of himself. Sephiroth then speaks through Cloud, revealing that Cloud's memories are not his own. Rather, they belong to Sephiroth. The soldier persona invented by Cloud is merely the embodiment of one part of Sephiroth's emotions. This explanation, regardless of whether it's the truth or a manipulative story spun by Sephiroth, is a far cry from what we're given in the final version of the
Yeah, because in the final version, he basically, like, his memories were like a mixture of his and Zack's. So he was originally going to have, like, Sephiroth's memories, I guess. Just got fired. Oh, no. That sucks, man.
game. Players will remember the mysterious sequence of illusions shown to the party at the end of the Whirlwind Maze. These visions, whose content is true even if Sephiroth's commentary is not, culminate in the appearance of a mysterious dark-haired man. One disc and a dozen or so hours later, we finally learn this character's name, Zack, the soldier first class upon whom Cloud's false persona is based. At this point, you're probably wondering, how could Cloud's climactic scene of self-discovery have worked without Zack showing up at the northern crater? The answer to that is, it didn't. At the time this scrap scene was written, the big reveal regarding Zack didn't exist, because Zack himself didn't exist. One autumn...
So, Last Elixir, he does a lot of stuff, like little skit type deals in the background with the Final Fantasy VII models. It's all over his videos. They're really like nice little touches, and I appreciate them.
Day in 1996, Tetsuya Nomura received an unexpected character design request. FF7 was only a few months away from completion, and all the other character design work had long since wrapped up, some of it nearly a year ago. Yet here, in the very last stage of production, was an order to create a brand new character named Zack. Nomura recalls thinking Zack would turn out rather differently. He envisioned him as a more rugged and threatening character, with a cool demeanor not unlike the one Cloud affects at the start of the game. He would later be surprised to learn of the young soldier's antsy squatting and light-hearted tone, cheerful character traits that would help inspire FF10's Tidus years down the line. With the release deadline looming, Nomura didn't even have time to color his illustrations. He created a mock-up for a chibi model and the top half of a full-proportion CGI reference before rushing his designs to the staff member who had requested them, Kazushige Nojima. If you're a fan of the Final Fantasy franchise, or if you've watched some of the other videos on this channel, you'll know that Nojima is credited for writing FF7's scenario. He joined the project late in the spring of 1996, after concluding work on Bahamut Lagoon, another Square RPG. By the time Nojima arrived, world building was already in place for things like Midgar, Shinra, and the livestream. A basis for these had been provided in an early proposal penned by producer Hironobu Sakaguchi, which featured an unnamed city that ran on Mako. Director Yoshinori Kitase and character designer Tetsuya Nomura then expanded upon this foundation. Nomura tackled the character side of things, focusing on Cloud's story and his pursuit of Sephiroth toward the Promised Land. Kitase, for his part, focused more on the game's world and overarching structure. Nonetheless, the game still lacked a firm narrative, and it was Nojima's job to piece together what the planning staff had come up with into a cohesive scenario. Fortunately for Nojima, the creative process turned out to be pretty laissez-faire, and he was handed the reins to do whatever he wanted. Of course, Nojima still obliged FF7's numerous leads, and tried to work in ideas from the local dev server wherever possible. These included Nomura's proposal to have the party pursue a group of mysterious black-cloaked men, as well as and tried to work in ideas from the local dev server wherever possible. These included Nomura's proposal to have the
Jesus. Look at how caked up that fucking monster is. But why is his ass Got a bunch of like scratches and cuts on it though. He's into some weird stuff. But then again, when you look like that, you kind of got to be into weird stuff, right? It's kind of expected. Butt scales? God, if you had scales on your butt, imagine like shredding your toilet paper every time you had to wipe. Sounds like it does whenever there's a word with PH. Your voice sounds good though. I don't know. I'm not hearing it.
Party pursue a group of mysterious black-cloaked men, as well as a premise for Aerith recognizing her first love in Cloud. Nojima found this latter idea very intriguing, but was unable to bring it to fruition for quite a while. There were a few suggestions for who Aerith's previous partner might be. Nomura, for his part, considered making it Sephiroth, while another proposal had it somehow turning out to be Cloud himself.
Probably cause amnesia or something.
Probably cause amnesia.
As Nojima began putting together the game's scenario, a serious problem revealed itself. FF7's story was missing a middle act. What's more, production was moving fast.
Gotta move quick!
Development had begun in earnest in November 1995, and, after a delay foretold by Uematsu's fortune teller, would be mostly finished by the same month next year. There wasn't time to pause and chart everything out. Therefore, Nojima had to figure out how to fill in the game's missing middle even as the team went about creating maps and implementing events. Nojima says that it was Kitase who prompted him to inject an air of mystery into the plot. This came in the form of Cloud's false identity arc. Inspiration struck when Nojima saw a motion Motomu Toriyama had created for Cloud in the game's opening sequence. Starting with this cocky-looking pose, Nojima began to conceive the mystery of Cloud's true identity. But even as he worked through the game's dialogue and implemented a number of his own
He's
fields,
such a cool-looking
including
dude.
Aerith's church, the Northern Crater, and parts of the Highwind, a grand and eloquent solution eluded him. It wasn't until the final stage of development, just months before the game went gold, that Nojima took charge of the Nibelheim event scenes and began to tie all the loose threads together. Even then, he kept everything to himself.
None must know
Fellow
my
staff would come up to him
machinations.
at work asking about the big reveal, but he stayed quiet, determined
must
to get
know.
it all ironed out first. Wild theories abounded about how the plot would finally tie together. All the while, FF7's
love
other
how low
event
poly
planners
Cloud has
had to
no
go about
biceps with his
creating and
forearms you could use
implementing
as a
their
weapon.
scenes without this
Yeah,
vital
the
piece of the
Popeye
puzzle.
models.
Looking back,
Classic.
Nojima claims that Zack was created not only as a means to unify Cloud's arc, but as an answer to the question of Aerith's first love. As such, he was able to kill two birds with one narrative stone. In implementing the Nibelheim events during FF7's livestream sequence, Nojima used a particular image as his guiding star. He had a clear vision of Cloud removing his trooper helmet, thus revealing his true identity. Nojima then built out the rest of the sequence to link up with this kernel scene. Kitase recalls his mounting curiosity as Nojima went about putting a bow on Cloud's false memory arc. When he learned a new character named Zack had been introduced, his anticipation only deepened.
This shit's gonna
Ultimately,
be so sick.
Kitase helped implement numerous maps in the climactic Nibelheim sequence, and was likely one of the first to see Nojima's solution in its full
I
glory.
knew my boy had
In
it in
fact, it was Kitase who chose to play the world map music when Cloud removes his helmet in Genova's chamber. Because the game's tracks weren't properly titled at that point in development, Kitase had no idea Uematsu intended the song to be used on the overworld. Against all odds, Nojima had crafted a brilliant solution that tied together all the dangling threads of FF7's middle act, as well as some loose ends concerning Aerith. But there was still work to be done. Zack's existence in the story needed to feel convincing. There needed to be foreshadowing. This wasn't an issue to include in the events Nojima already was responsible for, namely the episode at the end of the Whirlwind Maze. Remember that alternate version with the stuff about Sephiroth's shadow? Nojima was easily able to rewrite it and account for Zack. But what about the rest of the story? The scenes on FF7's many maps were handled by no less than 10 event planners, including Nojima and Kitase. While Nojima's scenario specifies the plot and includes much of the game's major dialogue, the majority of FF7's script was actually written and implemented by other staff members.
Whoa, they had a
Nojima
dolphin on
recalls
staff.
asking a handful of event planners to inject some foreshadowing about Zack into their scenes.
Number one plot fixing
He says
boy.
he only requested changes from the staff members he found it easy to talk to, leading to a bit of an imbalance with where hints are scattered. Taking a look at FF7's map data, we can see just who these event planners likely were. The first is Kitase, which should come as no surprise, since Nojima worked more closely with him than any other member on the project. Kitase was in charge of many maps in Nibelheim, including the lab beneath Shinra Manor, where Cloud and Zack were held captive, as well as the library just past it, which contains reports about the fugitive subjects. Next is Hiroki Chiba, one of FF7's most prolific event planners, who handled the gondola car at the Gold Saucer, Elmira's house in the Sector 5 slums, and Evergreen Park in Sector 6. Motomu
Nibelheim.
Toyama, another major event planner, pitched in with edits to the Honeybee Inn sequence and likely a sneaky line in Starboard Junon. Event planner Jun Akiyama also probably did some reworking of his event on the Sector 5 slums rooftops. Finally, Keisuke Matsuhara, who is in charge of Gongaga, presumably made some substantial changes. In doing so, this missable town became much more important. Where before it only provided further exposition for Shinra's evil and Scarlet's Magnus Materia plan, it's now most memorable for its connection to Zack.
No.
There was also at least one Zack-related event that didn't end up in FF7's final release. The scene takes place in Tifa's house when the party visits Nibelheim in the present. There, Tifa and Aerith disclose their mutual knowledge of Zack, but agree not to mention anything to Cloud. In this version of the scenario, Tifa wears a locket containing the picture of her, Sephiroth, and Zack taken 5 years ago. Aerith instructs Tifa to hold on to the locket, predicting that it will come in handy one day. This scene was likely linked to an alternate idea Nojima had for how Cloud would discover his true identity. It's worth remembering that in the original Japanese release of FF7, Zack speaks only 2 lines. That's less than Reeves' dad. Do you even remember Reeves' dad? And
Reeves has
yet,
a dad?
soon after the game's release, FF7's developers were flooded with feedback praising the character and asking for a clearer conclusion to his story. FF7's international release served as an opportunity to give players more of what they longed for, a hidden scene detailing Zack's heroic demise. And, fan feedback aside, Nojima had a sense.
I mentioned this scene in my streams before. That stream is totally optional. I've gone actually years without seeing it because you have to go back to the mansion like long after you're done there, you know? So it's like, unless you're trying to see it intentionally, most people aren't going to go and get it like on accident, unless maybe you get Vincent like super duper late.
He hadn't been able to do Zack the justice he deserved. If we take another look at the Ultimania Omega's early material file, we get a clue about what this might mean. Directly after the alternate version of the Northern Crater scene is a scrapped episode where Cloud remembers waking up in captivity and being questioned by Hojo. At the end of this short section is a summary of the events that follow. As you can see, they correspond to what happens in the hidden scene with Zack in FF7 International, which must mean that Nojima already knew the specifics of Zack's fate, but never had the time to implement them as an in-game event. Needless to say, Zack's expanded backstory was well received by players, and an enduring fandom grew up around his character. These fans...
Yeah, it really is crazy, because, like, so a lot of young people, like young Final Fantasy VII fans, don't know what it's like to have very little Zack, right? Because, like, a lot of younger fans grew up with what was it, Crisis Core? You know, Zack's game. They grew up with that being in existence. But like me, my first game in the series was Final Fantasy VII when it came out, you know, like, so like for a long time, Zack was like this, like, fucking phantom kind of, it was kind of like Reptile in like the first Mortal Kombat, you know. It was like one of those like, whoa, what the fuck, like it's so cool. And like his next like biggest inclusion was as just a playable character in Ergites, which obviously didn't really expand him as a character too much. So it's just like you just had this character that was kind of just floating around in the ether, and he was really, really cool to like think about.
Would be treated 10 years later to Crisis Core Final
Crisis
Fantasy
Core,
VII,
yep.
an all-new game dedicated to Zack's untold story. Fast forward another decade and a half, and Zack is once again in the limelight with his expanded role in the remake trilogy. While opinions are split on how Zack's character has evolved across FF7's compilation, there's little debate that his addition to the OG was a masterful stroke of storytelling. It's hard to imagine the game's middle act without him, and even knowing how late he was introduced to the plot, it seems impossible his appearance wasn't planned from the beginning.
Right.
Though much of Cloud's character is based on Zack in-universe, quite the opposite is true from a development standpoint. In Nomura's illustration, he notes that Zack is physically almost a copy of Cloud, and instructed most assets to be reused for his models.
So that's really funny. I'm keeping quiet, not the FF7 fan. Gotcha. It's actually really funny to find out that you know, in the story, Cloud is a copy of Zack, but in real life, Zack was a copy of Cloud. It's like pottery, it rhymes.
In the OG FF7 at least, Zack is remarkable for how much additional depth he brings to Cloud's character. Then again, Nojima has stated that the same is true of most of the game's cast, who one might say exist primarily to enrich the game's two nemesis, Cloud and Sephiroth. 15 years after the original game's release, Nojima reflected on the touch of chaos in FF7's production that allowed Zack to happen. I think it's because we didn't have any
Well, no, pottery's got a rhyme, right? Because, like, you know, it's on that little spinny thing, so if it didn't rhyme, then it'd be all uneven, and right? Pottery.
Definite answers that we were able to speculate where the story's premise should lead and create such compelling content. In a sense, that approach may have been inefficient, but I think Final Fantasy VII was the last game we were ever able to create in that way. In a day and age where video game scenarios need to be completed before development can proceed, it's interesting to consider what's been lost in the way of narrative improvisation.
Yeah.
FF7 blossomed at a time when late-stage changes to the story were still easy to accommodate, and in many ways wound up better for it. Perhaps one day, game makers will be able to reclaim that level of flexibility. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that video.
That's him?
I'm Turquoise Hammer, one half of the duo here at Last Elixir Productions, just making an appearance to let you know Odysseus...
Look at him. He's like a Chad. You could see his pecs through his shirt. I appreciate that he did call it improv. Having done pottery, that description pisses me off because it's too accurate. What's up, Panda?
and I have started a Patreon for the project. Obviously, these videos take some time to write and record and edit, but there's also a ton of work that goes into research. That includes not only poring over FF7's files, but finding, obtaining, scanning, and translating all sorts of old literature about the game, which tends to cost money as well as time. And that's where you come in. If you're a fan of the channel and would like to contribute more than you already are by watching our videos, please head on over to the Last Elixir Patreon and consider making a monthly donation. All backers will get early access to new video releases as well as some other nifty perks at higher tiers. Mainly, it's a cool way for our community to ensure we can keep making these ridiculous videos.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
definitely
that's the
suggest.
spiel. Thanks for listening, and
I
we'll
see
see you
that
next
gun.
time.
Why was there was a gun off frame? What the frankly, a lot of the character development isn't from the game. It all came from. It's the 3 years of add-on. It's the years of add-ons. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of really good character development in the game, though. Like even the whole thing with Cloud was already like huge at the time. But yeah, so that was Last Elixir Productions. Highly recommend checking that guy out. He's great. He's great.